The iron gates of Blackmoor Castle groaned open like a living thing. Helena Mordaunt felt it in her bones. This was not just an estate. It was a warning. Rain crawled down the coach window, blurring the shape of grey stone towers that rose into a sky the color of pewter. The moors stretched behind the walls like a dark ocean, empty and endless, as if the world ended here. Helena sat perfectly still, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles turned pale beneath worn kid leather gloves. She was 26, and she had learned to measure life in losses. 3 years ago her father, Baron Mordaunt, had died in disgrace. His gambling debts, £40,000, had swallowed their home, their security, their standing. Creditors took Mordaunt Hall. Her mother and younger sister were sent away to relatives in Scotland. Helena refused charity and took the only work she could find, teaching at a small dame school in Bristol for £12 a year. She taught spoiled merchant daughters their letters while her own sharp mind, her gift for numbers and languages, slowly dulled from hunger and exhaustion. So when an advertisement offered £22 a year at Blackmoor Castle, she accepted. It was still a pittance, but it was a ladder, a way back up from the pit. The notice had been brutally honest. Viscount Samuel Dalton of Blackmoor, widower, exacting standards, difficult temperament, companion and bookkeeper required. No delicate sensibilities need apply. Helena had no delicate sensibilities left. Before we go further, if you enjoy dark, emotional stories where a woman fights her way out of ruin and finds unexpected love in the most dangerous place, please hit like and subscribe now. It helps the channel and you won't want to miss what happens inside this castle. The coach stopped before massive oak doors studded with iron. A footman appeared, his uniform immaculate, his face carefully blank. He helped Helena down without meeting her eyes. That single detail told her everything. This house trained people not to feel. Inside, the entrance hall was cold despite the fire burning in the distance. Mrs. Penrose, the housekeeper, waited with steel-gray hair and a posture like a blade. "Miss Mordaunt," she said, "neither warm nor cruel. His lordship will see you immediately. Follow me." No thea. No rest. No moment to breathe. Helena followed through corridors designed to intimidate. Dark panels, sharp corners, portraits of grim ancestors staring down as if judging her for daring to exist. The air smelled of beeswax, and something bitter, like old anger trapped in stone. Mrs. Penrose stopped at a heavy door, knocked twice, and entered without waiting. Viscount Dalton stood by the fireplace. He was tall, over 6 feet, broad-shouldered in severe black, hair dark with gray at the temples. When he turned, his face held hard lines carved by years of control. His eyes were pale gray like winter ice. They swept over Helena as if she were an item delivered late. "Miss Mordaunt," he said coolly, "I have made inquiries. Your father was Baron Mordaunt of Suffolk." Helena swallowed the sting and lifted her chin. "Yes, my lord. He made grave mistakes. I do not deny it. See that you do not inherit them," Dalton replied. "I will not tolerate incompetence, laziness, or dishonesty. You will manage correspondence, accounts, and my library. You will speak only when addressed. Mistakes will be fined from your wages. Absolute discretion is expected." Helena's pulse stayed steady. "Understood, my lord." He held her gaze a moment too long, then said, almost like a threat disguised as manners, "Welcome to Blackmoor Castle." And as Helena turned to follow Mrs. Penrose up the narrow stairs to the tiny room beneath the eaves, one thought echoed in her mind. If this man was the storm, what kind of damage had already been done inside these walls? Helena's room sat beneath the slanted roof like an afterthought. One narrow bed, a washstand, a chair, a small desk, and a single window that looked out onto the moors. No village lights. No neighboring estate. Just wind, rain, and emptiness. "Breakfast is at 6, Mrs. Penrose said at the door. "His lordship expects you in his study by 7. Do not be late. He dismisses servants for tardiness." When the door shut, Helena allowed herself exactly 5 minutes of despair. 5 minutes to admit she had walked into a polite prison. 5 minutes to wonder if £12 a year in Bristol had been safer than £22 under a tyrant's roof. Then she stood up, washed her face in cold water, and unpacked her 2 small trunks with careful discipline. Survival had never been gentle. It would not start now. The first week taught Helena what exacting truly meant. At dawn, Dalton summoned her to copy letters in her finest hand. She worked for hours by candlelight, every stroke precise. When she presented the finished pages, he glanced once and slid them back. "Disgraceful," he said. "Copy them again." She copied them again. He rejected them again. By the 8th attempt, her fingers cramped and her eyes burned. When he finally accepted the letters, he offered no acknowledgement. Only the next task, as if her exhaustion were invisible. The accounts were worse. He demanded she reconcile 5 years of ledgers, then called her at midnight claiming errors. Helena would sit at his desk while the fire crackled low, searching for mistakes she could not find. "If you cannot manage simple arithmetic," he said one night, "you are unsuited to this position." She swallowed her anger and recalculated everything until sunrise, not because she believed she was wrong, but because she knew he wanted her to bend. The library cataloging became another form of punishment. He criticized spelling that was correct, rejected systems he had approved the day before, ordered her to move heavy volumes from shelf to shelf only to decide the original arrangement had been better. Helena learned to make herself small, calm, unshakable. She measured her responses. She refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. But the castle's true cruelty revealed itself through someone else. Lady Sophia Dalton was 9 years old. Helena first saw her in the library, locked inside as punishment for giggling during a lesson. Miss Winters, the governess, stood nearby with a tight mouth and colder eyes. "Improper levity," Miss Winters explained. "His lordship insists on absolute decorum." Behind the door, Helena heard soft crying. It hit her like a knife. Not a dramatic sob, worse. The quiet, swallowed kind. The kind a child makes when she has learned that being heard is dangerous. That evening, while Mrs. Penrose oversaw supper, Helena borrowed a key from the housekeeper's ring. She moved quickly, heart pounding, and slipped into the library. Sophia sat curled in a window seat, trembling. When Helena spoke, the child jerked her head up in terror. "Please don't tell Papa I cried," Sophia whispered. "He says crying is weakness. He'll be angry." Helena crouched to Sophia's level, keeping her voice low and steady. "Crying is not weakness, my lady. It is simply what hearts do when they hurt." Sophia stared like she didn't believe such words could exist. Helena hesitated, then offered a quiet secret. "I cry too sometimes. Usually at night, when no one can see. I miss my mother. I miss my old life. Some days are very difficult." Sophia's lips trembled. "Does that make you weak?" Helena shook her head. "No. It means you are human." Sophia's eyes filled again, but this time it looked less like fear and more like relief. From that night forward, Helena found small ways to give the child kindness. An interesting book left where Sophia could reach it. A quiet question answered without scolding. A whispered lesson about the stars through Sophia's window, pointing out constellations while the castle slept. And slowly, Sophia began to change. Not much. Not loudly. But enough that Helena saw something dangerous beneath the fear. A bright, hungry mind. A heart still capable of joy. And a child who deserved far better than the man who ruled this house like a judge instead of a father. By the 3rd week, Helena understood Blackmoor Castle ran on fear the way other homes ran on warmth. Sophia barely laughed anymore. But when she did, the sound came out like a stolen thing. Quick, guilty, immediately swallowed. Helena watched the child flinch when footsteps approached in the hall. Watched her shoulders tighten when her father's voice echoed through the stone corridors. Watched her become smaller, quieter, more careful. One night, Sophia spoke in a whisper so soft Helena had to lean closer. "Mama left because I disappointed her," the child said. "Papa told me. He said if I had been better, she would have stayed." Helena felt something go cold inside her. Not sadness. Not pity. Rage. Helena had heard the old story. It was London gossip, even in Bristol. Lady Cassandra Dalton, the Viscountess, had run away with an Italian artist. Not because her child failed her. Because she chose passion over duty and left destruction behind like ash. And Lord Dalton was using that abandonment like a weapon. He was letting a 9-year-old child carry blame that didn't belong to her, because it kept Sophia obedient. Because it made her easy to control. Helena's hatred of her employer deepened into something solid and sharp. Numbers became her escape. When she could not sleep, she reviewed the household accounts. Arithmetic calmed her. Figures did not lie. Columns did not sneer. A ledger never punished a child for giggling. One night, she cross-checked repair invoices against work she remembered hearing discussed by the staff. And she found something wrong. A bill for roof repairs on the east wing, £200. But Helena distinctly recalled Mrs. Penrose saying the east wing roof had been repaired the previous year. Curious, then suspicious. Helena pulled older ledgers and began comparing. The pattern surfaced slowly, like a stain spreading under clean cloth. Invoices for repairs never done. Costs inflated beyond reason. Duplicate charges for the same work. Vendors with names that appeared once were paid generously, then vanished. And always the steward's signature approving it. Cornelius Blackwell, the land steward. He smiled at dinner, praised the wine, talked about estate improvements. And he was stealing them blind. Helena worked through the nights, documenting everything. She created her own ledger of discrepancies, cross-referencing dates, matching payments to supposed projects, tracing the money like a hunter following tracks. When she finally calculated the total, she sat back stunned. £15,000. Stolen quietly over 6 years. It had been hidden in plain sight, because Lord Dalton was too consumed by bitterness to look closely at his own life. Helena bound her evidence into a portfolio. Every invoice copied. Every contradiction laid out. Every theft made undeniable. Then she sat alone at her small desk and considered her options. She could tell Lord Dalton and try to earn favor. But favor from him wasn't freedom. It was another chain. She could leave anonymously. But cowardice wasn't in her bones. No. She would expose the theft openly, then leave with her dignity intact. The opportunity arrived on a warm September morning, when sunlight broke through the gray for once. Helena stepped into the garden for a rare breath of air, and found Sophia there with a kite, struggling to untangle the string. Miss Mordaunt. Sophia lit up. Mr. Davies helped me make it. Will you help me fly it? Helena looked toward the castle. No one watched. No footsteps se approached. She made a choice. I would be delighted, my lady. They ran across the grass. Helena lifted the kite. Sophia shrieked with laughter. Real laughter, bright and free, like a bell in a room that had forgotten music. The kite caught the wind and rose. Sophia clapped. Look how high it goes. Helena smiled softly. Like your spirit. Given the chance, it soars. And that was the exact moment Lord Dalton's voice cut through the garden like a whip. What is the meaning of this? Helena turned. He was striding toward them, face tight with fury. Sophia's joy vanished instantly. Her body went rigid, fear snapping back into place. Inside. Now Dalton barked. Sophia fled without a word. The kite sagged and fell from the sky like a bird shot down. Lord Dalton's eyes fixed on Helena with cold rage. You forget your place, he said. You were hired for duties, not to corrupt my daughter with frivolous entertainments. Something in Helena finally snapped. Not her control. Her patience. Corrupt. Helena's voice shook, but not with fear. I gave your daughter 1 hour of happiness. 1 hour of being a child instead of a prisoner. Dalton's face flushed. How dare you? How dare you terrorize a 9-year-old child? Helena cut in, stepping forward. She is afraid of you. She doesn't giggle because you punish joy. She doesn't ask questions because you punish curiosity. Dalton's voice went strangled. Enough. You are dismissed. Helena didn't blink. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a sealed letter. I cannot be dismissed, my lord, she said calmly. I resigned yesterday. Dalton froze. And Helena held the power of that moment like a blade. Lord Dalton stared at the resignation letter, as if it had teeth. Helena held it steady, her pulse finally calm. She had spent her whole life being pushed, by grief, by poverty, by society, by men with titles who believed they owned the air around them. But this time, she had moved first. This letter, she said evenly, is addressed to your solicitor. I posted it yesterday. What I hold now is your courtesy copy." For a moment, Dalton said nothing. The garden wind tugged at his coat. Somewhere in the distance, a crow cried out across the moor like a warning. Then Helena reached beneath the stone bench and lifted a leather portfolio. "Before I leave your employment," she continued, "I have a parting gift." His eyes narrowed. "What is that?" "The truth," Helena said, and opened the portfolio. She laid the papers out with controlled precision. Invoices, receipts, ledger copies, a timeline, clear patterns, names, amounts, dates, proof that could not be laughed away or dismissed with a cold insult. "Your steward, Mr. Cornelius Blackwell," Helena said, her voice sharp as glass, "has been stealing from you for 6 years. £15,000 to be exact." Dalton took a step forward as if pulled by gravity. He grabbed the top page and read it. His face drained of color. Helena watched him process the numbers, the signatures, the blatant duplicates. "You were so occupied making everyone around you miserable," she said quietly, "that you failed to notice the thief sitting at your table twice a month, complimenting your wine while robbing you blind." Dalton's fingers tightened around the paper. His jaw flexed. "Blackwell dined here last Thursday, did he not?" Helena pressed. "He praised your burgundy. He spoke of improvements he will bill you for, improvements he will never complete, just as he has done for years." The portfolio trembled slightly in Dalton's hands now, and Helena knew she had reached the part that would truly break him. "There is one more thing you should know," she said, lowering her voice into something almost gentle, because this truth did not need shouting. "Your daughter prays every night." Dalton's eyes flickered. "Do you know what she prays for?" Helena asked. His throat moved. Still no sound. "She prays that you will die," Helena said simply. Those were her exact words. "She believes the house will finally be happy when you are gone." The pages slid from Dalton's hands and scattered onto the bench and grass like fallen leaves. For the first time since Helena had arrived at Blackmoor, he looked unarmed. Not powerful. Not terrifying. Just a man standing in the wreckage of his own cruelty. Helena felt no triumph. Only exhaustion. And a strange, aching pity that surprised her. "I have sent copies of this evidence to your solicitor as well," she said, more quietly now. "Blackwell will be arrested. The proof is irrefutable. You are welcome, for saving you from being robbed further, if not from yourself." She turned away. "Miss Mordaunt." Dalton's voice stopped her. Helena paused but did not face him. "Why?" he asked, raw and stripped down. "Why do this if you were leaving anyway? Why not let me continue to be robbed?" Helena's answer came without hesitation. "Because theft is wrong," she said. "Because Blackwell's crime harms not only you, but every tenant and servant whose lives depend on this estate. Because I may despise you, my lord, but I am not you." Then she walked back toward the castle, trunk already packed, shoulders straight. In the entrance hall, Mrs. Penrose waited with a carefully neutral face, but her hands betrayed her. She pressed a small purse into Helena's palm. "From the staff," Mrs. Penrose murmured. "For speaking up for Lady Sophia. For standing up to him. We wanted you to know it mattered." Helena's throat tightened. She curled her fingers around the purse like it was warmth itself. "Thank you," she whispered. "Please, look after her." "We will," Mrs. Penrose said. "Though none of us have your courage." The coach was waiting. Helena climbed in without looking back at the towers, the windows, the stone that held so much cold silence. The iron gates closed behind her with another groan. As the road carried her toward London, her fear returned in waves. She counted her money. Enough for the fare. Enough for perhaps 1 week's lodging. After that, nothing. And still, Helena did not regret it. Because dignity was the only thing nobody could seize from her unless she surrendered it herself. Back at Blackmoor, Lord Samuel Dalton stood in the garden long after her coach disappeared. The evidence lay scattered like accusations around him. £15,000 stolen. 6 years of blindness. But worse than the theft was the echo of Helena's final sentence. "Your daughter prays that you will die." He stumbled as if struck. He had told himself he was teaching discipline, strength, control. He had told himself that harshness kept Sophia safe. But what he had actually taught her was terror. And in the silence of the garden, something inside him finally broke open. An unbearable truth he could no longer avoid. He had become the monster his house resembled. Lord Dalton moved through the castle, like a man waking from a nightmare. He climbed the stairs 2 at a time, breath tight in his chest, and stopped outside Sophia's door. For years he had entered without knocking, as if the child's room was simply another part of the estate he owned. This time his hand trembled. He knocked softly on the bedpost and forced words past his throat. "Sophia, may I come in?" Inside, the child lay curled on the bed, face buried in a pillow. Miss Winters sat in the corner with a satisfied, rigid posture like a judge overseeing punishment. Sophia lifted her head and flinched when she saw him. Lord Dalton turned his head toward Miss Winters, voice cold. "Leave us." She opened her mouth as if to protest, then saw something in his expression, and hurried out without another sound. The moment the door clicked shut, silence filled the room, thick and heavy. Lord Dalton approached the bed slowly, as one might approach a frightened animal. He sat on the edge, leaving space between them. Sophia's eyes were swollen from crying. Fear lived in her face the way sunlight lived in other children's. Dalton swallowed. He began automatically with the old habits. "I have nothing to apologize." He stopped, because it was a lie. Another lie. He stared down at his hands, then up at his daughter's face. "No," he said hoarsely. "That is not true. I must apologize for everything." Sophia blinked, confused, almost desperate not to hope. "For every harsh word," Dalton continued, voice rough. "For every punishment. For making you believe your mother left because of you." Sophia's lips trembled. "Papa." "Your mother left because of her own choices," he said, the words cutting his own pride open. "Not because you failed. You were a child. You are a child. And I have been cruel because I was too much a coward to face my own pain." Sophia stared at him like she was seeing a stranger. "I told myself I was teaching you strength," Dalton whispered. "But I taught you only fear. I punished joy because I could not bear to see happiness while I felt empty." He leaned forward, hands clenched. "I have been wrong, Sophia. I have been unforgivable." Sophia's breath hitched. Then the tears came, huge, shaking sobs that she could no longer hold inside. Dalton's own eyes burned. He reached out carefully, silently asking permission with his body. When Sophia leaned toward him, just a little, he gathered her into his arms, holding her as if she might vanish. "I don't want you to die, Papa," Sophia cried against his coat. I wanted you to love me. I wanted you to be kind like Miss Mordaunt. I wanted you to see me." Dalton closed his eyes, pain tearing through him. "I do see you," he whispered. "And I do love you. I always did. I just didn't know how to be what you needed." He pulled back enough to look at her. "Can you forgive me? Can you give me a chance to be the father you deserve?" Sophia nodded, trembling. "Yes." And in that fragile, impossible moment, the castle felt less like a fortress and more like a home that might someday be healed. In the days that followed, Lord Dalton acted with a ruthless clarity Helena would have recognized. He summoned his solicitor. Blackwell was arrested, tried and sentenced. The stolen money, what could be recovered, returned to the estate. Dalton raised wages for the staff, apologized to people he'd treated like shadows, dismissed Miss Winters and replaced her with a kinder teacher. And every evening he sat with Sophia, reading to her, listening to her, letting her speak without fear. But one thought refused to leave him. Helena Mordaunt. Her dignity. Her courage. Her refusal to be broken. So he hired an inquiry agent. 3 weeks later, the man returned with a location: Spitalfields, London. A dressmaking shop that worked desperate women to the bone. Lord Dalton went himself. He found Helena hunched over tiny stitches, hands red and swollen, shoulders drawn inward from exhaustion. When she looked up and saw him, shock flashed into guarded caution. Outside in the filthy street, he apologized, properly, fully, without excuses. And then he offered her something she had never been given at Blackmoor: respect backed by action. A position. A real salary. Authority. Safety. Dignity. Helena did not melt. She did not become grateful and small. She set her terms. "The first time you speak to me with contempt," she warned, eyes blazing. I will leave. And Lord Dalton, Samuel, met her gaze and gave his word. That was the beginning of their second story. Not the one built on fear. The one built on change. On patience. On a man learning to be worthy. On a woman learning that strength and tenderness can exist in the same heart. And on a child who finally stopped praying for death and started believing in love. Before you go, if you want part 2 of Helena and Samuel's story, where the slow romance begins, the society pressure hits, and Sophia becomes the world's most determined matchmaker, drop a comment saying part 2 and tell me which moment hit you the hardest. Also share this story with someone who loves powerful redemption arcs, because you never know who needs a reminder that people can change when truth finally breaks through.